What do you believe right now that's making you feel this way? And when you analyse it, you realise how irrational you can be at times.
Every single one of our major customers and minor customers all shut their doors overnight.
It's not sales per se, but the outcome of it is, because people get to know you, they get to see you.
Making those efficiencies to maximise service profits as well as just product profits.
When you lose the enthusiasm, that's the point to move on.
Scaling up a business isn't easy. If it were, we wouldn't have less than 4% of businesses scaling beyond 10 employees or around £1 million turnover level, and less than 1% beyond 50 employees. But the contribution that we make as owner-managers to our economies is immense and should never be underestimated, yet it can be a tough gig for all of us at times. And only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And through ScaleUp Radio, we aim to help make things a little easier. We interview guests who have been where you are now and may have faced some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked for them, as well as what didn't. And we've also combined many of the lessons from these interviews, and also through working with hundreds of owner managers over the last 10 years or so, into a practical scale-up handbook that we've called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, or ESUS. And it's for owner managers like you and me as we navigate our own scale-up journey. And you can order a copy through your favourite online book retailer, or by going to all the W's, esusgroup.co.uk, www.esusgroup.co.uk.
Hello, I'm Granger Forson. Find me at www.bizsmart-gloucestershire.co.uk or find me on LinkedIn. Welcome to another enthralling episode of ScaleUp Radio, where we reveal the secrets behind scaling businesses. Today, we have an episode that is bound to touch your hearts as much as it will ignite your entrepreneurial spirits. Our special guest is none other than the compassionate and visionary Steph Douglas. She is a doting mother of 3 and the brains behind the beautiful conceived company, Don't Buy Her Flowers. Imagine this. You're a new parent, your world has changed overnight, and in the midst of it all, the overwhelming emotions, you receive a package. It's not just any package, it's a thoughtfully put together one, chosen for you by the person who sent it. This is the kind of warmth and care that Steph wanted to deliver through her venture. But the journey of creating this reservoir of kindness wasn't a walk in the park. Steph candidly shares the twists and turns, the highs and lows, and the leaps of faith she took to get where she is today. What started as a simple yet profound idea evolved into a thriving business that offers heartwarming gift packages for any occasion. In this episode, we also delve into the cornerstone of Steph's venture, the people. Friends and family are the core team that she's built. We discuss the strengths and challenges that come with involving loved ones in the business, the importance of transparency, and how to harness the power of a united front. So hold on to your seats as we unravel a story that is much about the human connection as it is about the business acumen. So grab your favorite beverage, get comfortable, and get ready for a journey that's going to leave you inspired, motivated, and raving to take on the world. Let's go over and listen to Steph. So, hello, Steph Douglas. Welcome to ScaleUp Radio. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hello. So I'm Steph Douglas, as you said. I am a mum of 3. I live in Richmond near London, but I grew up in Stroud in Gloucestershire, and that is where my business is based. So I run thoughtful gift company, Don't Buy Her Flowers, which I started in 2014. And it came about because when I had my first baby, I got given lots and lots of flowers, which was really all well intended. But it struck me as a really strange gift to give someone when they are probably feeling quite exhausted. It's another thing to care for. So that was the crux of the idea. But my background is in brand and marketing. I've mentioned my 3 children. I always must get them in, and a husband as well.
Brilliant. Wow. What an exciting time in terms of 2014. Along comes first baby and you decide then to set up a business. So did that come out straight away afterwards, or was there a little bit of time?
There was a bit of time. So I had my first baby in 2010, and then I had another baby in 2012. But the idea came very much with my first. And then I was in that phase where lots of people were having babies, lots of friends were having babies, and I would give them some chocolate and a magazine. I'd send it in the post, or if I didn't live near them, or I'd leave food on their doorstep if it was a friend and lived nearby. And the response to that was, it didn't really fit with the amount of effort that had gone in. People were so overwhelmed by it and like, oh my God, this was for me. This is so thoughtful. And so that was kind of where the gem of the idea, I guess, came. But I did go back to work after both of those two children, and was sort of taking my time. I think I was just trying to work out. I never was in my head to become a business owner, but I couldn't shake the idea. And also going back to work and realizing I couldn't get excited about it in the same way I had before, and trying to juggle the childcare and thinking maybe if I did my own thing, it would be more flexible, which in reality, I mean, it is, but it also isn't, because I've never worked harder. Yeah, so there are a combination of things, but it definitely wasn't straight away. And I think that's probably quite important to mention, because I think there can be a pressure on women to have a baby and come up with some amazing idea on their maternity leave and crack on with it. And actually, it benefited me to go back to work, get back into routine, get my confidence back and all those things before starting the business.
Okay. So tell us a bit more about the business. Thoughtful gifts. Yeah. No more flowers. What sort of products do you do?
So the very first packages we had, there was one that was called a care package, and that was really simple. It was tea, flapjack, magazine, scarf. It was all things that, because when we first started the business, it was gifts for new mums very much. And it's really evolved since then. And now we cover lots of occasions. And actually birthday's our biggest reason, which is great in lots of ways, because that's constant year round. We do gifts for men, we do gifts for children. So it has really evolved. But that idea of thoughtfulness is the key bit. So it's what is going to help someone take a bit of time for themselves? Can you encourage them to have a sit down, read a book, have a hot drink, put on some cashmere socks, lots of lovely beauty products that are going to help them relax, and wine and candles and that kind of thing. Some really nice drinks, whether alcoholic or non-alcoholic. I know you've had Sibling Gin have been on your podcast, haven't they, Cecily? So they have supplied us with gin. So we've got lots of products, and we've got about 250 plus British products. Lots of them from kind of small, medium-sized businesses, and then a few kind of bigger names in there, which people really like that mix. And the idea is you can hand pick your package. So 70% of our customers want to hand pick their products and put something completely bespoke together. So we have ready packages which you can buy, and you can choose whether dark chocolate or milk chocolate, or a few tweaks, or you can go for something completely bespoke, and then you supply your message and we handwrite that on a gift tag, and it's all beautifully gift wrapped, and we send it all off to the recipient. Wow,
that's really amazing. And all that's built up over the last few years. So how big a business are you now in terms of, what's your turnover in terms of, number of packages going out, et cetera? How many staff do you have?
So we, it's grown steadily since we started, and then we had COVID, which actually for us was just bonkers. So we grew 600% year on year in 2020, which was challenging from a logistics operational point of view, but also amazing, but also complicated because it was during a time that was horrible for lots of people. So it was a really strange one. And we hit a turnover of 2.5 million. At the moment, we're sitting about 1.2. So it's a challenge now is really to push the business back up, but in quite a tricky environment where retail is struggling in lots of ways at the moment. So we are focused on fulfillment and corporate gifting, as well as our B2C offer, which are both really growing areas for us. And there's at the moment about 12 members of staff. And again, during COVID, I think we got to 32 at one point. So it's been quite a journey. But the core team are mostly friends and family, actually. So my brother is the director of ops, and I've got two of my oldest best mates. One covers customer services and does some of the corporate gifting, account management as well. And another one does warehouse managing and accounts. So it's a really close team, and they've been amazing in lots and lots of ways. So I know they kind of say don't work with family and friends, but actually I think it was definitely the right thing for us, because they're in it with me. They're kind of in the business rather than just seeing it as a job.
And I don't think there's any right or wrong in terms of don't work with family. It's more a case of, do they enrich the business? If they don't enrich it, then yes, I can see where that wouldn't work.
Well, and I think there's probably some friends you could work with and some friends you couldn't work with, and same for family members, right? So you've kind of got to figure that out and have quite a lot of honest conversations up front to say, how is this going to work? Or I'm feeling really unhappy that you did this thing, or whatever that is. You've got to be able to have those conversations. So my brother has been with us for 7 years. So he came in quite a long time ago. So we've definitely learned lots about working with each other in that time.
Absolutely. I can quite imagine that in terms of that. So a bit more understand in terms of then the marketplace. You're saying, it's struggling in terms of retail at the moment. What are the sort of key trends and the changes in your products and services? You've talked about moving into corporate gifting. What's going on in your market?
Yeah. So I think obviously there's a cost of living crisis. There's also, like, it's just been this week, it's been interest rates, and those kinds of conversations have an impact on traffic immediately. We always see that. Last year when they were talking about energy prices, April last year, that's when it kind of that started. And so there's a nervousness from people. And my understanding from talking to lots of other business owners and looking at reports on retail is it's kind of across most retail, apart from a few people who are kind of bucking the trend. So I think it's going to be a really challenging phase for lots of people. But for us, where we've looked at B2B gifting, so with corporate gifting, quite a lot of it is really it's just not very good. There's a lot of stuff there's lots of logoed things that aren't very nice. Sustainability wise, I think people are much more conscious of that. So you don't want a box full of stuff that you're never going to use, and you don't want. And for me, part of the key thing around thoughtfulness is that we've really carefully chosen the product. So you're not going to get something that's either not very good or just nobody really wants to use. But also the environment has changed in that you've got loads of people working from home, lots of people hybrid working. So for employers and companies to connect with their teams is a huge challenge. And so if you kind of follow anyone who's like a head of people or who talks about customer experience and client engagement, that kind of thing, a lot of them are looking at ways that they can reach people. And I think for us, we've found that thoughtfulness is a really key one. So it's not just about sending everyone the same thing, which we can do, but actually what people tend to do with us is say it's Christmas and they're sending out 200 packages. You might have 20 of those that are vegan. There might be 10 who don't drink alcohol. There might be, and all of that we can do. So we have a sort of personal service that we work with them. We can put branding on there, which companies obviously like, especially if it's coming from them and it's Christmas. So that whole area is kind of up for taking, I would say, because there's lots of big companies that have existed for a long time that have done it, or kind of really traditional hampers. And what we do is, again, you can create a package from different categories. So it might be food and drink, it might be beauty, it might be accessories, it might be stationery. And you can pull all those things together, which can end up being like a kind of event that you're giving somebody rather than a box of food or drink. And so that's just all quite exciting, really, because it's just something a bit different that's come out. And we have found now that 1 in 20 of our orders through the website is a corporate order. So that will be, someone in the team going, I need to send a package to Sheila because of whatever reason. And then someone says, I know this business, and they use it because they're B2C customers who are essentially converting to B2B. But equally, then you've also got those people who then go on to contact us and they want us to develop packages with them. They want to do onboarding, gifts, that kind of thing, or rewards or anniversaries. There's just lots of occasions. And then the other thing we mentioned was the fulfillment. So we started we've got 3-4 clients, but it's another one coming on board. So doing fulfillment for other businesses, because we learned so much during COVID. And had to scale up very quickly. And obviously with orders a bit quieter, we've still got that capacity and the skills and the space and the teams. And also we found from talking to lots of small businesses who, especially if they're doing it themselves, there's a real nervousness to pass it on to a fulfillment company if they're not sure if they're going to be able to do the personalized note. Are they going to remember to put the postcard in? Are they going to put it in the right size box? We've had some companies who've said that their product has gone out in a massive box, even though they know there are smaller boxes that they've supplied, but the people packing it don't really care. So our job of thoughtfulness that we deliver for our customers is kind of, we can carry that through. And it's really nice actually, because then you've got some of them are people who are doing it from their house exactly the same as I did for the first 2 years. And we're kind of enabling them to move into that next phase. And I know from experience that when we took the business out of my house, it allowed me, and someone else was doing the fulfillment, as in my brother and the team in Gloucestershire, it allowed me the headspace to think of new ideas, to work on the marketing, to do all the other stuff that a business requires that you just can't do if you're packing boxes. I think for most businesses, it has to be something that you eventually want to pass on, unless you've got a whole team, around you who are doing all the other bits. So that's a really interesting area for us, because again, we don't have to buy the stock, we don't hold the stock. It's just from a revenue point of view, it's works really well.
And I love the word you say, interesting, because that's when I work with my clients, and we're looking at strategy and thinking, we always say, what's interesting? Because actually it's in the interesting things that you find opportunities that other people don't see. So I like the word.
Yeah.
So brilliant. If I may, so you talked about why you started, okay, and going into it. So take us through some of those early years in terms of the business growth. What went right, what went wrong? Because you talked about that moment where you decided to move it out. That must have been a decision for that in terms of doing that. So take us through your sort of journey and give us some thoughts and some tips.
So I'd started a blog before I started the business, and I was writing about motherhood and relationships, and it was almost like that was my stepping stone to starting a business. I had a job. I was working in brand and marketing, a big energy firm. I was working on the London 2012. I was okay, but I knew I wanted to do. I'd had the idea for the business. I knew I wanted to do it, but it just felt like such a leap, like to leave a fairly steady, stable situation, and having no experience of retail either. And so I started this blog, and that really built momentum. And I found from that I was building a community and people responding to it. And I was writing very honestly about motherhood. So people saying, I also found this hard. People it's changed quite a lot in the last 10 years, but at the time people weren't necessarily talking about that. And so that gave me the confidence to then start the business. But it also meant that when I started the business, I had this community of women primarily who totally got what the business was about. So that had worked really, really well. And it sounds really strategic, and it wasn't really all my background is marketing, but I don't think I didn't sit down and go, I know what would work really well. And so I started the business in the November, and we started with 3 packages. So in that time, I had looked at lots of products, looked at kind of competitors. There wasn't much out there at all at that point. And really was just working out what I could do that was quite simple. So I had 3 packages. It was just gifts for new mums. That was the focus. And when we launched, the website crashed because I'd had this community that I built through the blog, and they all came and we're all sharing it and we're all really supportive, which was amazing. But, that feeling when your website crashes and you're like, no, because these are people. And it was like, oh God. But we got that sorted. And then it kind of was a really steady growth, and quite quickly customers were saying, oh, I want to send this, but I don't want it for a new mum. I want it for someone who's in hospital or someone who's been bereaved, or even miscarriage actually has become a reason that people send our gifts, because again, it's all about thoughtfulness and encouraging someone to take a bit of time for themselves, showing some TLC. So that evolved. And that first couple of years, I didn't have any budget. So in terms of marketing, it was just using this community that I built, using PR, social media, which I did all myself, and just making as many connections as possible where you don't know if it's going to lead to anything, and you might be doing someone a favor and maybe they'll do it back and you don't know if they will, but it's all that. And I guess it's probably networking really. And and we had that steady growth. And it got to a point a couple of years in, and I said to my brother, Chaz, I don't know if I can, I don't quite know how to take the next step, because where I live, any sort of space would be crazy expensive. But also I'd need to find somebody to do it. And I just couldn't get my head around that. And he joked, well, I could do it. I could run the business from here. And we were in Gloucestershire at the time. And then I took him up on it. So I think I rang him like the next day. I was like, would you? And he had a job that he had to leave, and it was my first proper employee. I had at that point, after about 9 months, I had a couple of girls from the local college, and they would come and pack boxes in my house. But that was quite strange in itself, because they'd have a key. I might be there, I might not be. I had 2 small children at the time. So it was kind of chaotic, because I also had stock hidden in various corners of the house.
Yeah.
But it was a massive learning curve. I learned how to pack the boxes, how to buy all the stock, all of that stuff I had to learn. And then, we were ready to move. When it moved out, I was ready for it. And actually, probably I should have done it sooner, because as soon as I did that, it allowed the business to grow, because I had someone else packing and managing the stock and all of that stuff, which gave me the headspace to come up with new ideas. So that's kind of the first couple of years, really.
So in that time, and maybe now, running a business as a business owner, we can get overwhelmed. There's so much to do. There's so much to think about. How do you manage the sort of the overwhelm, and especially with a family, as everything else, that adds to that complexity. So how do you get around that?
I mean, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, I think would be the honest answer. I think it is really hard, and I mentioned earlier, I've never worked harder in my life. And when it's good and you're flying, it's hard, but it's exciting, I guess. But it's still hard, because you're coming up with challenges and you've not faced this before, and you've got to do this very quickly and all of that stuff. And when it's hard and it's not doing so well, that's also challenging. So there's never seems to be a point where you just can relax. And there's always more to do. And I think you go through phases. Sometimes you're better at it than others, depending on what else is going on and what other responsibilities you have. And sometimes I can kind of park it and be like, right, that's it, I'm done for the day. And other times I think it's like, well, I could do more. What can I do? That there's always more. But that is the issue. There is always more. So you're never going to be done. So you've got to work out how to get to a point where you can kind of stop.
And that more is always those new ideas, that new direction, that new opportunity. So how do you think about the direction of the business? What do you go through to help yourself do that?
I think I'm probably, I am my kind of core customer, really, and myself, my friends, the people around me. And so I think it's paying attention to what people are saying, how people are feeling. TLC is now our second biggest occasion that people buy packages for, which again ties in with women primarily feeling overwhelmed and a bit exhausted, and juggling too many things. So I know that we've kind of tapped into that, because then you're offering something that is, I think there's something there where a friend or family member is sending you something and they're saying, I recognize that you are exhausted, and I want to send you some nice words and some nice products to help you relax and encourage you to relax. And I completely underestimated how powerful that was, actually, that empathy that you can get across with our packages. And so I think that's kind of, again, another kind of core value for us that I didn't know was part of it when we started.
Yeah. And values are really important in a business to understand, to define. And as your business grows, that can be diluted, it can change. So you're quite a distance away from the fulfillment center in terms of where your brothers work and run it all. How do you manage the business to keep that cultural fit and that inclusiveness across the whole business as you've grown?
Yeah, I think, I go down to the warehouse most weeks and I'll stay over, and we have plenty of calls, video calls. And I think the core bit is the people, like who the people are, employing the right people, which doesn't always happen, but that core team who have now been with me for a good few years and who I've known for most of my life, for most of them, that's really key, I think. And it's quite interesting how you can disrupt that if you bring someone in that isn't quite the right fit, and how you can add to it if you bring someone in who is the right fit. And it's very hard to know that, I think, when you have those, initial interviews or initial meetings, which is probably why I've ended up with quite a few of the team of people who I've known for a very long time, because I absolutely know them. So I think that's the challenge that all businesses have. And it's recognizing when it's not working, I think, and being able to say, this isn't working. And I think probably in the past, sometimes we've kind of tried to flog something, thinking we can improve this relationship, or we can make this fit better. And that isn't always possible, but that's quite a hard one to learn.
Yes, very, very much so. And finding the right people to fit first, but then hopefully over time to help them grow and develop within an organisation. But they don't always do that.
No.
I loved your thought there in terms of, actually some of your best people, the people you've known for so long, so you already know them in terms of doing things. And we talk about having a people bank. Yeah. So over time you get to know people and you put them in your people bank, and you keep in contact with them, because you find those people over time that would eventually they'll be really good to sort of bring in, and you're using your personal network to do that. That's really clever, really clever.
My head of marketing was someone I worked with at EDF Energy, and I'd left there when I started the business, and I used to meet up with her every 6 months, and she'd be like, "Are you ready for me yet?" And we'd kind of joke. And then eventually I was ready for her. So exactly that, like, we'd stayed in touch. I knew she was a real worker and she was smart, and she gets on brilliantly with the team, even though she's not related to me, didn't grow up with me. I think the other thing that you just said as well about watching people evolve in their roles, that's a really key bit, because we've got people who came to pack boxes and then they've ended up managing a warehouse, or, do different roles. And that you get a big kick out of that, because you can see it when you can see someone, and actually having to point it out to people, like, say, do you realize how much you've grown with this, or how your confidence has changed? So if we look back a year ago, would you have stood up in a meeting and said that thing, or had that idea, or made that commercial, notice that commercial thing that needed to be recognized? And I think that's a great part of it, when you get those people, which is, again, the core team. That's definitely what's happened.
And the fact that you recognise that, actually, and I could see it in your face, because our audience only listen to this in terms of doing that, and you recognise that you're there helping those people grow into those roles, and you've pointed it out to them and helped them see that in terms of doing that. That's a very insightful piece of advice and thought that you've got there. We're not taking people on just for today. We are also potentially taking people on to help the business and grow and fit in that growing business. So wow, that's fantastic thought and observation in terms of that. You talked about marketing. So what marketing works well for you? How has that sort of grown and shaped and changed over time?
So I think for us, anything that's kind of storytelling works really well. So that's where PR is great, where there's more opportunity to go into the story, and also social media. PPC has worked well, but is very expensive at the moment. So Google Ads, and cost per acquisition is high for most people, I think. So that's challenging. And I think it's not being too reliant on performance-based marketing. So wanting to really look at the brand. And for us, the brand is really key, because that's where we can stand out. There's lots of gift companies, but what we do, and that thoughtfulness, and that running through everything. So whether that's in the products we choose, or the packaging, or how our customer services will respond if someone contacts them and they're having a terrible time, or they don't know how to support someone who's having a terrible time, and we can help them. That's really core for us.
So, you talked about storytelling across social media, etc. So, what do you define as storytelling? I'm interested in that.
I think the story around having a baby and motherhood being not everything that I was totally expecting, because I don't know what I was expecting, but I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. That, and then connecting with people through that. So also I write, and I've got the podcast, and I still, although I had the blog before the business, and then I wrote a bit but not a lot, and then it's kind of really evolved to the podcast, which is talking about overwhelm, talking about being a woman, and working and juggling, and the kind of rush hour that lots of people of my age are in. And I think those are all ways to connect with your customers, essentially, for me, so that you stand for something more than just a box of products. And that's been really key to what we've done to build the brand.
Yes, I can definitely feel that in terms of the way you come across and you talk about that. And I think that's probably one of the powers behind your marketing and the way the business has grown through that activity. So yeah, fascinating. One last businessy question then, before we get onto some of my favorite final questions in terms of bits and pieces. Cash is king in every business. So how do you keep on top of cash in the business?
So we hadn't taken any investment until very recently. So we've been looking at fundraising recently, and we have just taken some investment. It's still very early days, but I initially, anything that went in, we've really just kept churning back in. Any profit went back in. What we kind of made during COVID and had that boom, we did we donated some money to charity, and because it just felt really weird to not, and we work with lots of charities. We work with Stand Up to Cancer on our Stand Up to Cancer care package, and we work with a baby loss charity called Teddy's Wish. So it felt like it was important for us to do that during COVID. And then we also reinvested. We rebuilt the website in that time. We invested in an inventory system. So we've kind of always put the money back in. And then at the moment, we got to a point where we need to be able to spend more on marketing in order to grow the business, because I think that tends to happen, that you hit a point where you need to invest and you need to put money into it. So that's a whole, it's been challenging in that I knew very little about investment and raising money. But actually I've got a great network, and I've reached out to lots of people and said, can I talk to you? And you kind of just learn, you have to learn it, but it is like another language. And sometimes I've sat down with someone and they're using acronyms, and it depends who it is. Sometimes I would ask, and other times I'd note it down and be like, right, I'll look that up later. We're not wanting to look stupid. But I think I feel really proud that we got to where we did without taking investment. And I think there's lots of different ways to do it. And the kind of build a business really quickly, have your exit strategy before you've even started it, put in, raise that money and sell it, and have planned all that before you've even started. That's not the route I wanted to go down. I think when you've got shows like The Apprentice and Dragon's Den, that's very much the kind of story that we were sold as when I was younger. And so you kind of don't really know all these other ways of doing business. And similarly as well, I think I've had conversations with people who said, don't, sell your mother before you give away equity. And it's like, well, it really depends on your situation and on your ambitions, or there's so many factors. So you have to, I think I spent a good few months talking to a lot of people to find out what all the different options were. And then you have to ultimately go, right, well, this is the one I'm going to go with. It's a different phase. So far, anyone we've got involved is kind of, they're not looking to dramatically change it. And all the warnings that you also get aren't something that we need to worry about at this stage, but we'll see. It's all change.
Well, that's the next exciting step in terms of the journey, in terms of what you want to do with it. And I do love the fact that you actually researched it to the level that you've done to make sure that it's right to fit for the business in terms of what you want to do. So, which is an important aspect of any next step when you're trying to do things. So, takes me on then to, if we were to meet in 5 years' time and we're looking back for the last 5 years, what's happened professionally and personally for you for the business to have been really successful?
I think probably the first would be to have a better balance, which I imagine quite a lot of people say. I don't want to miss out on my kids growing up. They are 5, 10 and 12, and they're pretty great, actually, as well as sometimes extremely annoying. But let's go with they're pretty great. So I'm conscious of that. I think when you run a business, it's a constant distraction. Like, it's very hard for it not to be, even when you're not sitting in front of your laptop. It's so consuming, and it can be. So trying to find that balance better is key, and to not feel kind of burned out and all of that. And then I think we're looking at the moment at potential partnerships, and whether that is retailing in a store, or partnering with other brands. There's lots of conversations going on, and I think we're kind of just figuring out what that looks like. But what I don't want to do is hold Don't Buy Her Flowers back, because COVID actually gave me kind of an insight into the potential scale of it, and that was without us kind of marketing it and all that. So I think I don't want to hold it back. I want to make sure if we take it forward in a different direction, or when I say a different direction, I mean, if I'm at some point not involved, I would want to feel like I've done everything that I can do first. And there's still loads of ideas. One of the biggest challenges with Don't Buy Flowers is actually there's so many avenues you could take. There's so many things you could do. Because we haven't taken investment up to now, you can't do them all at once. So in lots of ways, that's good, because it's made us make careful choices and sort of go steady. But I also want to be able to see what's possible with it.
Fantastic. I love that, in terms of the passion you can see in terms of all the ideas, where you want to go, but the steady growth that comes with careful decision making in terms of that. Steph, what a fantastic conversation we've had. Can't believe that 40 minutes has passed so quickly in terms of that. Starting your business from in 2014, from that concept of, I got so many flowers when your first baby came along. I mean, and I do know that situation, having 4 children myself. And that slow growth in terms of working from your own home, building that from that, allowing people just to come in to help pack boxes. I love that comment in terms of that. That's just awesome. Making that decision to work with your brother and build a business, a warehouse in Stroud, in terms of making that growth, and finding those amazing people that have helped you grow and scale to where you are, getting through COVID and the massive change, but also seeing the opportunity through that in terms of doing things. I love the way you talk about telling the story through your marketing of who you are and what the business is, and how the packages have improved and changed over time, and the TLC packages, but now the sort of corporate helpful packages I need to help somebody in my business, she needs something or he needs something, and that availability in terms of doing that. But keeping those core values of your principles right. And you talk about that people can phone you up and ask for help when they're in a difficult place themselves, maybe, and want to know what they can do. And your team are there to have them, because you've created that environment and that excitement. And taking on now your next stage in terms of investment and growth, where you want to go, along the time also trying to keep that balance, that work-life balance that we are doing, or we're all striving for in our working lives. So it's been a fantastic conversation around all of that. Thank you so much. We always finish with a quick fire round, if I may. Just a few questions just to take us to the end. So if you were to go back to younger you, what advice would you give yourself?
Try not to worry so much. I've always been a worrier. My mum bought me a book when I was 21 that was called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it's all small stuff. So I think that kind of tells you, if I was doing that at 21, I would worry about things, but I think it's part of who I am. Probably it also means that I try to fix things, so maybe it's not all bad.
Brilliant. Which books would you recommend?
I think for reading, as in a hard copy of a book. I would much prefer fiction. And so I was thinking, I've read plenty of sort of business books and kind of self-help type books, but actually 100 Years of Lenny and Margot is a really lovely novel that I read last year. And then I think in terms of non-fiction, I've just read The Burnout Solution by Siobhan Murray. And I had her on my podcast. And that's really interesting. So she's a psychotherapist, and it's kind of a 12-week plan for anyone who's feeling burnout. And she explains why and talks about symptoms, but also like how to kind of get out of it, and then what to put in place in your life that might help you avoid drifting back into it. Because actually, if you're someone who's prone to burnout, you'll probably will always be prone to burnout unless you make some changes.
Interesting. I'll have to think out that episode.
Book.
Interesting. Any podcasts you recommend?
Yeah. So again, I think so for kind of more fun, I think the Table Manners podcast with Jessie Ware and her mum Lenny is good. They have some great guests. And then Fee Glover and Jane Garvey, who had the Fortunately podcast, but now they have it's off air with Times Radio after they left the BBC. I love them, and I met them in the last couple of years. I did some interviewing with them when they were on their book tour, and it's two women who are in their 50s talking, and which there aren't many podcasts like that. Actually, there's a lot of podcasts dominated by men. So it's just really interesting to hear them chewing the fat, really. They're very funny. And then I think business ones, I think Secret Leaders is great, which is a British one talking to founders, and then How I Built This is kind of a similar thing, but it's American version.
Right.
Those are very good.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So my favorite questions are: who's had the most influence on you as a business leader?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think it's very hard to choose one person. I think I tend to look for conversations from lots of different people. So I mean, people will say all the time, do you have a mentor or do you have that kind of one person? But actually, I think at different stages, you look for something different. I don't think there are many brilliant female business leaders to follow. There's a few really big ones who've had massive success, but I've met some brilliant ones. So Alex DePledge, who founded resi.co.uk, she's sold a business previously for a big amount of money. She's really good and very normal. I think sometimes in the business world, people feel they have to present a certain way, and I think for me, anyone who's emotionally intelligent and wants to connect, especially as a leader with a team, I think that's really key for me.
Thank you. And finally, how can people get hold of you, Steph?
So probably the best place would either be emailing me or Instagram. Steph_don't-buy-her-flowers is always a good way to get hold of me. I'm usually lurking there.
Well, Steph, thank you so much for this amazing conversation today. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, no, pleasure. Thank you. It's really nice to talk to you.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.